morning. Good to see everybody. Got folks from all over the country here today. Um, I had a number of things I wanted to talk about today, and as I was thinking about them, one koan kind of came to mind that kind of addresses everything, I think, or at least touches on everything. And for those who don't know what a koan is, it's kind of like a short story or parable that we meditate with in Zen meditation to try to penetrate the point of these parables. And so, yeah, the koan that is really sticking out for me today is case 14 of the Blue Cliff Record. A monk comes to Uman, or Yunmen in Chinese, and the monk says, "What are the teachings of a whole life, or what are the whole life teachings or teaching?" And Uman just simply says, "An appropriate statement." An appropriate statement. So this is one of those simple but rich koans that really do exist for our entire life, and we can continue to sit with a koan like this forever, always unfolding. Um, so, yeah, what are the lifetime teachings? What does that mean? Some people talk about that as, you know, the Buddha, the historical Buddha back in the 500s BC. Like, what did he teach over his lifetime? But I think it goes deeper than that. Um, I think the whole life, each one of us right now has experienced our whole life up until this moment. And whether we're 83 or 23, both ages we have represented here right now, we are all responsible for maintaining, manifesting, and expressing the teachings that we have gathered over our whole life. Right? And we all know that, the Buddha was 36 or maybe 37 when he had his grand enlightenment experience and started teaching. So his whole life teachings made him the Buddha. And I'm sure we also know a lot of 70 or 80-year-olds who still can't get their life right and seem to struggle with wisdom or manifesting any kind of meaningful teaching. So age is no excuse. And how long your life is has nothing to do with how you manifest your lifelong teaching, the teachings of your whole life. We're all teachers walking around with this wisdom that we've gained. And just in this moment, every moment, we have the opportunity to manifest those teachings of our whole life. So I think this question is a lot more personal than just what did the Buddha teach for his whole life? What are your whole lifetime teachings right now? And Uman responds, an appropriate statement. So I think working with this koan really, truly, with a teacher is going to offer a lot. But I think for the purposes of this talk, we can really just kind of look at this literally. Our lifetime of practice is about responding to our life in every moment appropriately. And I think that what this is getting at is that that is a lot harder than we think. And to me, the main nugget of gold in this koan is very similar So what I talked about a lot when I was talking about the Diamond Sutra, maybe some of you remember I gave a series of talks on the Diamond Sutra in the summer, in June, I think. And a lot of what we talked about was this teaching of non abiding, not staying anywhere, not getting stuck, not holding on to any one kind of teaching or concept or response. An appropriate statement, an appropriate response means that we're always flowing, um, never approaching any one situation with this is how it has to be. Open minded, open hearted. And I think, it's so hard to talk about this stuff, but I found something, a little snippet from a Dharma talk from Stephen Batchelor. Stephen Batchelor is kind of mucky muck in Western Buddhism. He ordained as a novice priest in an Indian Buddhist lineage when he was 19. He was born in Scotland. This is a Scottish guy. Lived in Canada and then moved back to England when he was a young person. So yeah, at the age of 19, he ordained as a monk in an Indian lineage, and then he moved over to study Tibetan stuff. By age 30, he was like publishing books on philosophy and West meets East kind of stuff, and he's kind of been like a major figure um, over the decades, kind of integrating Buddhism into a Western context. He's kind of philosophical minded as well. He's a little bit scholarly, so he's written some scholarly books. The first book I read of his is called Buddhism Without Beliefs. So he's all about like secular, atheist, Western science. So, um, you know, not necessarily like the author I would recommend for like strict Zen training purposes, but a monumental, prolific writer with some great, deep experiences in different lineages of Buddhism. Um, and so, yeah, I found a little Dharma talk from him on this koan. So I just thought I'd read a little bit of what he said. He says, "It may be that the highest teaching, or what you've been told is the highest teaching, may not be the appropriate one. It may be very profound, a very liberating practice, but it may not be appropriate for each situation. If we go back to the toolbox analogy, this was earlier in the Dharma talk. If we go back to the toolbox analogy, it's like saying, well, the best tool is the hammer. And now that I have this challenge of cutting up a piece of wood, well, I've got a hammer. It's really good. It's the best tool there is. But obviously, it's not any use for cutting up wood. So I think this is like a really important aspect of our practice because, especially in the West, where we like to read things, or all over the place, West, East, North, South, doesn't matter. The human spirit and the human mind wants to read things and agree with things and, ooh, that sounds right and that's how it should be. And it can be very subtle the way that we grasp onto things. And I think this koan is really pointing to the fact that the appropriate statement, the appropriate response, really comes from a place of not knowing. Total flow, total openness, inclusion of all the tools in our toolbox. So yeah, I chose this koan because I think it really addresses the three things that I wanted to talk about today. The first one, I was hanging out with some folks a couple weeks ago, and I was telling them about Sweetwater and what we do. And one of the people there said, uh, that's really cool. And I just feel like our faith leaders, our religious institutions really need to take a responsibility for addressing important current events. And they asked me, they're like, next time you give a talk, I really think you should talk about the fight that happened in Montgomery, Alabama. It was a couple weeks now, 2 or 3 weeks now. So that really resonated with me. And I was going to talk about it last week, but I was battling a cold. So luckily, Echo Sensei stepped in. So I just wanted to talk about that. I think it's very relevant to what we've already talked about. But for those who don't know, just really quickly, in Montgomery, Alabama, a few weeks ago, there was this incident where at the river, there was a ferry boat that needed to come in and dock, but there was a little personal, somebody's private boat that was blocking the way. They were asked to move their small boat. They refused. So one of the dock workers, who was a black man, came and started to move the boat for them because it just had to happen. Uh, the owners of the boat, who was a group of white people, got mad and started beating him up. Then other white people came in and continued to like add to beating him up. In response, a bunch of black people came down and started fighting and defending the dock worker. Um, it wasn't so black and white, so to speak. There were white folks coming to the defense of the black dock worker and stuff, but ostensibly, what it looks like in all of the viral videos, it does look like a race fight. And it got really big and it got pretty violent, and it became kind of a viral phenomenon. And so this person who was asking me to talk about it, they said, you should really talk about it and how nonviolence and peaceful means has to be the way to go. And I thought that was interesting. And as a pacifist myself, obviously, with my Buddhist practice, it's very easy to say, yeah, always nonviolence, peace, 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 city, peace, peace, peace. And then I started doing some research and I started listening to some commentary and I started reading responses to the Montgomery fight. And one thing I noticed was that a lot of particularly black commentators were saying basically the same thing, which was, now I never condone violence. However, there was a lot of sentences that started out like that. And, for a lot of reasons. But really poignantly, that Montgomery, Alabama being what it is, and the role that it played in the slave trade, the role that it played in the Confederacy, the role that it played in Jim Crow and the civil rights movement. For a lot of people, the idea that the black community could come together and confidently fight back against an aggressive white crowd was it seemed to be almost like a symbol of healing, a symbol of empowerment, and a symbol of growth. And it really got me thinking, maybe this is the appropriate statement. If I was in the yurt and a guy came in with a machete threatening to chop off everyone's head, what would be the appropriate statement? Would it be, sir, excuse me, can we please talk this out? No, you bash him in the head with a chair. I remember this story about my Zumi Roshi where I guess this could just be legend, but they had some kind of cockroach problem in the kitchen, and all of the little monks and priests and whatnot were like, Roshi, Roshi, what do we do? We have all these cockroaches and it's presenting a hazard, but like, we can't kill, we don't kill, peaceful. And my Zumi, without a moment's hesitation, just said, you kill them. They're roaches. Go kill them all. And so, yeah, I think that's just a really clear example of this fluidity that Uman is pointing to. What is the appropriate statement? Um, And it's a practice, right? That's why this is a lifetime teaching, because we don't always know the appropriate statement. It's in the same situation, it could be one thing or the other thing, depending on a bazillion factors. And so it's that openness and fluidity, bringing that to every single moment, that is that practice of an appropriate statement. And this is a really, this is how we practice with the precepts as well, right? Buddhism has, or at least the way we study it in Zen, we study the 10 grave bodhisattva precepts. And precepts are not rules. Precepts do not say you'll never kill, you'll never steal, you'll always be chaste, you'll never lie, you'll never take intoxicants, and so on. It's not like that. They're not rules to follow, they are points of practice. And so, in the context of fighting, I thought the ninth precept of don't be angry is a um, pretty interesting, relevant one. So I was thinking about this precept of not being angry and what is the appropriate statement of anger. And so I read, when you study the precepts with your teacher in our lineage, we use a document that was made by Yasutani Roshi, who is a Japanese teacher who worked with Maizumi Roshi, who's in our lineage. He also was the teacher of Aitken Roshi from the Diamond Sangha. He was like a major Zen teacher. And so, yeah, I'm just reading through his document about the ninth precept of not being angry. And he kind of says it nice, right? So he says, anger comes from the consciousness of a self. And here we must distinguish between getting angry and scolding. When someone chastises you, he might be correcting you for your own sake, not necessarily acting out of anger. It's like a parent scolding a child. Sometimes a parent may scold a child for the safety, and well being of the child. So I thought that was a really interesting analogy to think about, right? Think about if you have kids, when that's ever happened, they're about to touch the stove or they're about to jump in the pool, and you grab them and you say, no, that is not okay. It's kind of angry, it's aggressive, but extremely appropriate, right? That's how we teach people not to kill themselves in the pool. It's a very important thing. And in a way, I was kind of seeing this fight in that way, right? Like the people who own the boat who start fighting with the dock worker for doing his job, that's not appropriate. That's not okay. And so here come these people to the defense of the dock worker, basically kind of in that spirit. This is not okay. You cannot do that. Not just because it's bad for the dock worker and anyone else who's in the fight, but it's bad for you. It's not a good look for you. You should not be treating people like this. You should not be using force in this way because we have to move your precious little boat. And, you know, also as a sign to the Black community, Black folks, this is not okay. We cannot stand for this. So, in a way, that fighting, that violence, that aggression, to a point, could have been the exact perfect, appropriate statement. Now, it escalated. Some guy brought a chair over and hit somebody in the head. That was not necessary. I think we can say that is not the appropriate statement. Um, but yeah, I just wanted to, I'm not here to make any grand or final conclusions or evaluations of what should or should not have happened. But I think it's just a good example of this koan of what is the appropriate statement. When you're mad at your coworker, if your partner or your friend does something really inappropriate, um, to hold on to like, I shouldn't be angry, I shouldn't be angry, I should never yell, I should never fight, that may be doing yourself and your friend a disservice. So the second thing I wanted to talk about is an incident that happened to me a couple days ago, or I guess it was yesterday. I was driving down the street. I'm here in Los Angeles. I know it looks like I'm in the yurt, but trust me, I'm not in the yurt right now. I know it's hard to believe. I'm in Los Angeles doing some family stuff, and I was driving down a busy street, and I'm coming to a very big, busy intersection, and there's a car stopped on the side of the road in the middle of the right-hand lane. It looks broken down, and there's three gentlemen outside the car trying to like flag people down, waving a gas can. And so if I see people in need in the middle of the street, I'm pretty much determined, attached, holding on to, I'm going to go help them. That's something that I attach to, for better or worse. And so I rolled down my window thinking that, they needed a push, or, hey man, like I just need, we need $5 for gas just so we can get up the road, or I don't know, something. It looks like they were just reasonably in need of help. And so I roll down my window, I stop in the middle of the street, and I say, "What's up, y'all? Like, what do you need?" And the guy comes up and he goes into this long rant of like, I just lost my blah blah blah, and I need money for food and gas, and I got to get to Lancaster. And he did this whole kind of like weird, nonsensical, kind of frantic like pitch almost. Didn't seem to be someone who was just like, "Hey man, like, could you give me a push real quick? We're stuck here." It was like it felt a lot like I don't know, kind of felt a little scammy. It didn't really make sense. Meanwhile, I'm in the middle of the street. I got a bunch of people honking behind me. Um, you know, and then so I'm kind of confused. I feel like I'm getting scammed, but I also do have a dollar in my pocket. I have my hand on the dollar, but now I'm feeling a little bit scammed, and everybody behind me is honking, and they're mad at me. And so there's pressures in different directions. I want to help. I always want to help. I want to give, but I also don't want to encourage scamming, and I also don't want to make these people wait too much. And then I looked over at the third gentleman who was sitting in the car on his phone, I guess doing something, and he had a Trump hat on, Trump 2020 or something like that. And in that moment, um, I took my hand off the dollar in my pocket and I said, "I'm sorry, I can't help you." And I left. I don't know if that was the right thing to do. I feel really bad about the Trump thing. Uh, that was kind of in a moment that was already like, what is the appropriate statement here? What is the appropriate response? Holding up traffic, but wanting to be of service, but not wanting to encourage scammy behavior. And so pulled in all these different directions, and then, to say, oh, well, they support Trump. And this is not a statement on behalf of Sweetwater. We are totally neutral politically as a religious organization. But personally, when I saw the Trump hat, there was something in me that said, I do not want to support these people. Um, and I feel really bad about that. I think that's problematic. And I think that's a lot of, the heart of what we struggle with in this country and the world. They stand for this, so I will not help them. So I don't know what the appropriate statement in that moment would have been. But I think that that's what our practice is, right? Because that was a very kind of specific and like uh, writ large kind of example of a difficult situation and how to respond to it with lots of pressures in different directions of what's the right thing to do here. Um, and so I think, we encounter experiences like that every day in our life. Um, And so that brings me to the third thing I wanted to talk about, which was how do we deal with this complicated life of ours with all kinds of different moral, ethical, spiritual quandaries that face us every day. Um, and so, yeah, that brings me to talking about this upcoming Ongo or intensive practice period that starts on September 3rd, next week, next Sunday. Um, there's another quote from Stephen Batchelor that kind of is a nice segue here. So, yeah, he's talking about the importance of having a toolbox, seeing all the tools as important, not holding on to any one teaching, right? Like he said, you're not going to use a hammer to cut wood. So, in the same way, if we say, well, peace and nonviolence is the best way, that's the best tool, then when the guy with the machete comes in the yurt, you're not going to want to use that tool. You're going to want to use the tool that knows how to like knock his ass out. Um, and so, how do we do that? How do we develop our toolbox? How do we treat and take care of our toolbox? And he says, obviously there's things like study and reading and opening our minds to other philosophies and things like that. But he says something very interesting here. Um, yeah. So one hopes that with practice, this is Stephen Batchelor talking, with practice and experience, precise discernment becomes more and more of an intuitive property. And in Zen, there's a great valuing of the ability to respond to situations in a non conceptual, non hesitant way. But this doesn't happen just by chance. It is often the result of years and years of sitting facing a blank wall. What is cultivated is this quality of discernment, of appropriate response. So, he kind of talks about this, or it can easily kind of come off as if he's saying, through meditation, through dedication to this practice of silence and reflection, uh, we can gain this ability of like deep discernment and um, facility with our toolbox. And that's cool. But I think the really important thing, especially for us looking at this intensive period coming up, is that the sitting itself is the appropriate statement, the appropriate response. Taking this time um, to dive in, to take your practice seriously, to just a little notch of prioritizing a little bit higher your spiritual meditation, whatever you want to call it, practice, is the appropriate statement itself. That might be a little bit more of from the Dogen Zenji school of things. Um, but yeah, what a beautiful opportunity we have to take our life, all of the complicated, uh, nonsensical, hypocritical, paradoxical, difficult, challenging aspects of our life, and make a commitment to really let go and dive in. Not by reading something, not by trying to, grasp onto some kind of concept, but to really enter into this state of not knowing, right? The three tenets of the Zen peacemakers, which is such an integral part of our lineage: not knowing, bearing witness, and loving action. Um, that is how we manifest and live a life of an appropriate statement. And that first part, not knowing, is very difficult. That is the lifetime teachings that Uman is talking about. to really cultivate and develop this place of not knowing, not grasping onto anything, and to approach every moment fresh, every moment with childlike wonder, every moment totally open, I think is a very important aspect of how to live as an appropriate statement. And that doesn't mean that we don't study things, right? I think just sitting facing a blank wall without studying psychology or social dynamics or finances or all the different aspects of our life, that would be problematic. Probably hard to have an appropriate statement if you don't know anything about anything. This not knowing doesn't mean that we eschew information. It doesn't mean that we uh, deny and refuse knowledge. It just means that we take all the knowledge that we acquire and array it like a toolbox and enter into situations with that openness to use whatever tool is appropriate in the moment. Um, so I'm very excited, also dreading diving into this ongo practice. Basically, we'll release a formal schedule very soon, but we start with a session September 5th through September 10th. Session is a silent retreat with a full day schedule of meditation and work and liturgy and Dharma talks. And then for the following 3 months, we follow a 6 day schedule, Tuesday through Sunday, morning, afternoon, and evening meditation opportunities. And it's just a really powerful uh, container shift where we're just kind of prioritizing our practice, prioritizing our intention to investigate our lives together a little bit more deeply. So I really encourage everyone to think about how to participate. And I'm going to send out, actually, I did send out yesterday. I hope everybody saw, we have what we call an Ongo commitment form. And it's just, it's just a piece of paper or a page on your screen that just offers a couple very simple prompts about how we're going to use this time to together as a sangha step into our practice a little bit. And as you'll see, there's 5 different questions. And those are categorized and organized in terms of the 5 Buddha families, which we don't really have time to go too deeply in right now. But basically, there's the Buddha or the oneness family. That's our meditation practice. What is your commitment going to be to meditation? Some of us are going to follow the entire schedule. That's our commitment. Whatever is scheduled all day, every day, we're going to be there. But maybe that's not an appropriate statement for you. Maybe what's appropriate is like, you know what? Usually I sit 30 minutes a week, but during this period, I'm going to sit an hour a week, or I'm going to come every Sunday for Dharma talk. Do something that's realistic for your life and appropriate for your life. It's not about the quantity, it's about the sincerity of just making that little shift to join together in this time of intensified practice. So that's the Buddha family or the oneness. Then there's the Padma family, which is about relationship, clinging to people. So in the next 90 days, how are you going to look at how you deal with relationship, sexuality, romance? And again, think of something realistic. I'm going to call my friend Jean every 2 weeks because I know she wants to hear from me, and I think that would be a good thing to do. Or I'm going to refrain from such and such activity, whatever it may be, something realistic for you. Um, then the third family, I guess, could be the Ratna family or resources. How am I going to see my livelihood, my environment? Um, how am I going to use my time and my resources more intentionally? What can I change? Maybe, you know, I'm going to give to the guy experiencing houselessness down the street. I'm going to give him $1 a week instead of just walking past him. Or maybe I'm going to spend an hour volunteering at the local blah, blah, blah. Um, Something I've been wanting to do, but just haven't really had the motivation to. Some kind of anything that is appropriate for your life. And again, it could be the smallest thing. I'm going to spend 10 minutes a week painting the living room. Some kind of thing to get us to be more intentional about our life. The fourth family, Vajra, is the wisdom family. So, how am I going to study in this 90 days? Maybe I'll come to every Dharma talk instead of one Dharma talk a month. Maybe I'm going to finally read that book that's been on on my shelf for a year that I keep telling myself I'm going to read. Maybe I'm going to look into the ancient Buddhist texts. I've heard a lot about those and I've been really curious. And so for 1 hour a week, I'm going to, again, anything that makes sense. And then the fifth family is the action family. Um, so, how am I going to be of service in the next 90 days? How can I use my time and my energy to create something, to fix something, to offer something um, that I haven't been doing that I can add during this time? So please take a look at those commitment forms. Um, you can print them out and write on them. You can just type in, on the PDF if you can edit PDFs. But just writing that down and making that effort really helps to kind of solidify this community feel that we're all in this together. Even if it means you're staying at home the whole time and your commitment is about just doing little tasks at your house, it still helps. It still helps to create this container that we're all making together. And so, yeah, so you can fill those out. We have the opening ceremony next Sunday. I really hope everybody can come. It's a very short ceremony. We're going to do it at 9:30 instead of Gate of Sweet Nectar. But basically, everyone enters the Zendo together. We offer incense. We might do something like pinning the commitment forms to the lattice of the yurt so that we all have our forms there. If you can't be here in person and you would like to email me your commitment form, I can print it out and pin it up for you. That would be really nice. So it's a very simple, very quick ceremony, but it is kind of a nice formal entry into this time. And the more people that are there, it just feels really supportive. So even if you don't plan on participating a lot, even if your commitment is, nominal or paltry in nature, it's still important, and we really appreciate everyone's, the solidarity and the community support. So I really hope everyone can make it there. I hope everyone sees and feels the appropriateness of the statement of engaging in this practice with us. And, hopefully this deepened intention will help us to manifest more and more appropriate statements as we move forward. Um, Thank you all very much. I know I talked about a lot today. I hope there's enough water in the Pacific Ocean to rinse my words from your ears and whatever residue is left to serve you in some way. So I'll open it up to questions. If anyone has anything to add or share, please.